closely with these guys all the time, and they influence. It was basically to try and change the interpretation of Heinz ketchup as being a really unnatural product for kids. I mean, it's basically used to make kids eat most of their foods. It's on every dinner plate all of the time. And if you just have a little bit of ketchup, will you eat this? And it was trying to change the perception of it being full of sugar, full of salt, and really bad for them. And actually, it's a superfood. It's actually crown fat packed full of tomatoes. So we wanted to change their perception of Heinz tomato ketchup per se. And we did it in all sorts of different ways. Obviously, we brainstormed. We tend to get a group of people together, our experts together. We have sketchbooks. We have our one hard question at the heart of it, and then we start talking and exchanging kind of ideas. We then do an early stage of design process, which is always really loose, very, very conceptual kind of stuff. And even for an iconic brand like Heinz tomato ketchup, on a scale of 1 to 10, we would push the boundaries beyond 10 just to see how much we had to rein it back. And we actually, in this particular instance, used our brown heart process. We actually looked at 4 different brown hearts, and the winning one, which was grown not made, was the winner because of everything that it says. It was basically about the tomatoes are grown specifically by the farmers in sun ripened. Basically, it's trying to get a real natural feel happening on the pack. So actually, rather than the gherkin, which has been on their pack since a date I can't remember, but used to sit, I don't know if you can see this, right here, we actually removed the gherkin finally and put in a real tomato, which was much more about the product itself. We didn't change the very, very strong keystone shape of Heinz. We actually utilised it, so we actually merged and grew our vine from the inner key line from the Heinz tomato ketchup. We looked at the typography. Actually, for before, tomato and ketchup used to be the same size. They're now different sizes, so we emphasise the tomato, really bring it up to the forefront. And then used our strapline of grown not made. And beyond that, it wasn't just about what the label stuck on the bottle. The outer trays, so the shelf-ready packaging, they looked like wooden caskets that had been printed as if the fresh tomatoes had been picked and put in there. So it became one whole holistic approach. Okay, Bonio was a different project in that it was, again, quite an iconic brand. The Basset Hound was an iconic dog for that brand. It was on a red background already, but what we had to do is slightly modernise and give it a little bit more ownability and personality and make it more relevant for today. We went through, again, a process of early sketches. We wanted to bring alive the personality, not just in the picture of the dog on the front of the pack, but also in terms of the terminology that we use. So one of our brand hearts effectively was about keeping tails wagging, because that's when a dog wants his food, wants his treat, and he's at his most happy. So the picture of the dog, rather than a picture of the dog sitting eating the product, which is what the current one was, we actually, the way we cropped him and made him look a bit more dynamic on the pack and with his eyes looking up at the product, brought in his tail kind of wagging in the background as well to give it that personality. The Bonio logo was brought on, it was modernised, and we used the biscuit framework here to give it a little bit more ownability, and a part of the eye again was the biscuit itself. This stops people plagiarising. Nobody could do a Bonio version like this because we have got so much ownability. We've trademarked the logo, and it becomes a unique icon for the brand. Well, the name is trademarked, so nobody could use the name Bonio. They could bring out a biscuit in the shape of a bone, but in terms of the personality of this, they could never treat the icon exactly the same. So all the time we're trying to do is to give it some individuality, and also all of the design aspects around the pack, which again talks about, it's bringing that personality of life, makes it very ownable to this brand specifically, even to the point of give us a ring on the dog and Bonio. So it's a little bit of a play on the words as well. We were classed with finding out what really appealed to kids from the age of 8 to about 14. Now that is an awfully broad age range, but we did the right thing. We went and talked to them. We actually found out what they thought about the world today and what really was exciting to them at the time. And we got them to build up their own almost mood boards about what was relevant to them, what they did on an everyday basis, and that gave us a real insight into the world of those kids at that age. Randoms, again, a fantastic opportunity. It was called Randomoniums for a long time, but thankfully they shortened that because we wouldn't have fitted it on the pack. But it was about challenging Haribo a little bit in terms of a slightly more natural product. They talk about having contains real fruit juices here and no artificials, whereas Haribo is very much the almost what we call plastic fantastic of the sweets. We could introduce new shapes of sweets, and it was all about this whole personality of being completely quirky and completely off the wall. At one stage I think we had kittens jumping on space hoppers and all sorts of things as icons, because it's just things that were completely off the wall. So our designers had a fantastic time exploring all those really, really weird and wild times, but again always making it relevant for those teenagers or those younger children, and relating it back to them and testing it with them as well. And again it kind of built up a language, I think, on the back of the pack, although it just talks about a mix of bag of juicy jellies and squidgy foamy sweets in a mind-boggling array of shapes. Again, I think when we're talking about the pack, and I mentioned it earlier, the language and how you build a pack up and the language around the pack becomes the whole brand in itself. We designed about 8 or 9 of the actual sweets, and I think they're going to keep on changing them, which is just to keep this whole thing fresh. It was exactly that. I mean, the ice cream cone, which is the spongy, soft, foamy sweets. We did spiders, we did light bulbs, we've done an awful lot of them. And each of the packs have a different array of the sweets in there, again, to try and get people to kind of try and challenge them and have them each week to try and collect the different shapes. Always the ice cream foam. The foam ones are really, really nice. They almost melt in your mouth, so they're very nice. It was something that was kind of relevant but unusual in a sweet like random. As I say, it had to be random, so rather than these fruit jellies being apples and pears and bananas, they were just very random shapes, racing cars, light bulbs. It was just all those very different shapes that made them up. And each of them has kind of a story behind them. Surf, actually, they came up with this new, it's called FUBU, which is made by women for women. So the idea was it became your friend almost. It gave you a moment of joy. So we did things like put hints and tips for washing, but they had some kind of comical value to them. I always put 2 pairs of socks in the washing machine. Funny enough, I only ever come out with 1. Again, that was built up language. We changed from waves and splashes and all of the things that everyone had been so used to seeing in our to ladybirds on daisies, to splashes with fish jumping out of them, because we wanted just to change the perception. We wanted to get a little bit more fun. So it was a moment of joy in their laundry dungeon, kind of. That was the scenario for that. So we reinvented the way people thought about laundry. I think whether you're designing a flash for a pack or a whole redesign, you have to keep challenging, and by challenging you keep asking questions. We may come up with the one hard question right at the beginning which formulates the creative brief, but you can still challenge that. You can still ask those questions throughout the whole design process, right the way through to substrate choosing. Is it the right thing to have a matte substrate versus a gloss? Is it right to emboss this or to foil block it? I think we always ask the questions all of the time just to make sure that we get the right answer.